Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku wielded Iron Man's nanotech suit in battle? Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The salt was a ghost on his tongue. It was the same taste, the same smell of brine and rust, that had defined the 10 most grueling months of his life. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park wasn't the pristine stretch of sand it was now. Back then, it had been a mountain range of forgotten things, a testament to decades of societal neglect. It was his mountain. He had moved it, piece by agonizing piece, for the right to stand on the starting line. Now, a few weeks after the UA Sports Festival, the triumph of that memory felt as distant as the moon. The setting sun bled orange and violet across the horizon, casting the cleaned-up shoreline in a serene glow. But Izuku Midoriya felt no serenity. He felt only the familiar, frustrating burn in his muscles and the phantom ache in the bones of his right hand. Again, he muttered, his breath fogging in the cooling air. He crouched low, the worn soles of his red sneakers grinding against the pavement of the promenade. Green lightning, crackling and alive, began to spiderweb across his skin. It was a visible manifestation of the cosmic power thrumming just beneath his flesh. A borrowed, inherited inferno that he was trying to contain within a teacup. One for all, full cal. 5%. The power surged, a familiar pressure building behind his eyes and in his limbs. It no longer felt like his bones were about to turn to dust, which was progress. Now, it just felt like he was wearing a suit of armor 3 sizes too small, the seams groaning with every twitch. He could hold it for a few minutes now, but control? True control was a different beast entirely. His target was a large, discarded industrial tire propped against the sea wall 50 meters away. The goal was simple: a controlled dash, a focused kick, and a clean follow-through without losing his balance or letting the power spike. Gran Torino's lessons about using the power like an egg in a microwave echoed in his mind. Don't let it explode. He pushed off. The world became a green-tinted blur. The wind whipped past his ears, a roaring testament to the speed he now commanded. 20 meters. 10. He planted his left foot, pivoting, his right leg swinging around in an arc meant to be precise, powerful, and safe. But in that final, crucial fraction of a second, his focus wavered. A flash of memory, Todoroki's wall of ice, impossibly vast. The searing agony as his finger broke, then broke again, the desperate, soul-shattering scream as he unleashed a power that nearly cost him his arm. The power in his leg surged from 5% to a wild, untamed 8. The kick connected, but it wasn't clean. Instead of a sharp thwack, there was a thunderous boom. The tire didn't just fly, it disintegrated, black rubber shrapnel exploding across the beach. The recoil sent him stumbling, his form breaking completely as he windmilled his arms to stay upright. He landed awkwardly on his right foot, the one that had just delivered the blow, and a sharp, angry pain shot up his ankle. He hissed, collapsing onto one knee and clutching the joint. The green lightning sputtered and died, leaving him feeling hollow and weak. Stupid, he gasped, gritting his teeth. So stupid. You got distracted. You can't get distracted. He took a few deep, shaky breaths, his frustration a bitter pill in his throat. This was the reality of his quirk. It wasn't like Bakugo's, an extension of his own body he'd had since he was 4. It wasn't like Uraraka's, an elegant, intuitive force. One for All was a guest in his body, a loud, chaotic, world-breaking guest, and he was still learning how to be a proper host. Every small victory felt overshadowed by the monumental potential for failure. He'd won his match against Todoroki, yes, but he'd woken up in Recovery Girl's office with a hand that felt more like a bag of gravel. He had shown the world he was here, but he'd also shown them his glaring, self-destructive weakness. He could feel the chasm between himself and his peers, between the hero he dreamed of being and the reckless, bone-breaking boy he was. All Might was always so encouraging, telling him that progress was progress, no matter how small. But Izuku knew the truth. All Might had been a pillar of strength, a master of this power from the moment he burst onto the scene. Izuku was a liability. A flickering candle trying to replicate the sun. He flexed his scarred right hand, the dull throb a constant companion. The pain was a reminder. A punishment. He deserved it, he thought. For being too slow, too weak, for not being worthy. A flicker in the sky pulled him from his spiral of self-pity. It was high up, barely a pinprick against the deepening indigo of twilight. He dismissed it at first. A satellite catching the last rays of the sun. An airplane. But it flickered again, not with the steady pulse of a man-made object, but with an erratic, unnatural strobe. Then, the air changed. The gentle sea breeze died instantly, leaving a dead, heavy stillness. A low hum, so deep it was more a feeling in his chest than a sound in his ears, began to permeate the atmosphere. The hairs on his arms stood on end, a primal sense of wrongness crawling up his spine. This wasn't a villain. He'd felt the oppressive aura of the Noma at the USJ, the bloodlust of the hero killer on the news. This was different. It was sterile, alien. He looked back up at the sky. The pinprick of light was growing, descending. And directly in its path, the air itself seemed to bend, like looking through a warped piece of glass. The stars behind it shimmered and distorted. A perfect, circular ripple expanded from the point, silent and strange. Izuku's hero instincts, honed by a lifetime of observation and a year of brutal training, screamed at him. This was not normal. He scrambled back, putting distance between himself and the beach, his sore ankle momentarily forgotten as adrenaline flooded his system. He fumbled for his phone, his thumb hovering over All Might's contact. Should he call? What would he even say? The air looks weird? He didn't have time. The light flared, a brilliant, blinding flash of pure white that bleached all color from the world. He threw his arm over his eyes, a strangled cry escaping his lips. The hum intensified into a deafening, high-frequency thrum that vibrated through the soles of his shoes and rattled his teeth. It wasn't an explosion, not a sound of combustion. It was the sound of something tearing through the fabric of reality. Then came the impact. A violent, percussive crunch of metal screaming against metal echoed from the old junkyard section of the beach, the same section he had cleared to earn his power. It was followed by the tinkle of shattering glass and the groan of tortured steel. Then silence. A profound, ringing silence that was even more unsettling than the noise that preceded it. For a long moment, Izuku didn't move. He just knelt on the pavement, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. His mind raced. A meteor? A piece of a satellite falling from orbit? A villain with some kind of teleportation or energy quirk? His fear was a cold knot in his stomach, but something else burned hotter, his curiosity, and the unshakable drive that had defined his entire life. Someone could be hurt. There could be a fire. He had to check. He had to help. It was what a hero would do. Taking a deep breath, he reactivated full cowl, the green lightning a comforting blanket of power in the sudden darkness. He kept it at a steady, manageable 3%, just enough for enhanced speed and senses without risking his unstable control. He moved cautiously, slipping from the promenade onto the sand, his every sense on high alert. He crept towards the junkyard, the familiar piles of rusted cars and discarded appliances now looking like monstrous silhouettes in the gloom. A thin plume of smoke, smelling not of fire but of ozone and hot metal, drifted into the air from a spot deep within the scrap heap. He used the junk piles for cover, his movements silent and practiced. He was no longer just a fanda. He was a UA student. A hero in training. He peered around the edge of a crushed, yellow washing machine and saw the crash site. It wasn't a large crater. It was a focused point of devastation. A pile of scrap, a refrigerator, a car engine block, a tangle of bed frames, had been violently compressed, shoved downward into a shallow bowl in the sand. At the very center of the impact, embedded deep into the warped metal door of the refrigerator, was the source. It wasn't a rock. It wasn't a piece of satellite debris. It was an object of impossible design. It was triangular, about the size of his hand, forged from a metal so dark and matte it seemed to drink the moonlight. Intricate silver lines were etched into its surface, forming a complex geometric pattern that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic blue light. It looked less like a piece of machinery and more like a captured star, its light breathing in a steady, slow heartbeat. A faint warmth radiated from it, chasing away the evening chill. Izuku's brain, the one that had compulsively filled 13 hero analysis notebooks, kicked into overdrive. His fear was momentarily shoved aside by a tidal wave of analytical fervor. "What is that?" he whispered to himself, his muttering habit taking over. "The material is unknown, no visible seams or welds. It appears to be a single, forged piece. The light source seems internal, not a projection. A power source? The impact force required to embed it that deeply into reinforced steel. It must have been moving at hypersonic speeds, at least. But there's no significant heat scoring, no signs of atmospheric ablation. Which means it's either incredibly durable, or it was protected by some kind of energy field. Is it a support item? Something from my island? No, the design philosophy is alien. It's too clean, too perfect. Could it be a villain's device? Some kind of bomb? No, the light is too steady, it feels stable. He edged closer, his caution warring with his insatiable need for information. The humming had stopped, but the air around the object still felt charged, heavy with static. He could feel it prickling his skin. He knelt down, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. It was, without a doubt, the strangest thing he had ever seen. He had to get a closer look. He had to understand it. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out his right hand, the scarred one. His fingers trembled as they neared the object. The warmth intensified, a pleasant, vibrational heat that soaked into his skin. The blue light seemed to brighten in response to his proximity, its pulse quickening to match his own frantic heartbeat. His fingertips were a centimeter away. He could feel the energy emanating from it, a clean, potent power that felt nothing like one for all's chaotic storm. It was focused. Refined. He touched it. The moment his skin made contact with the cool, smooth metal, two things happened at once. First, the object's light flared from blue to a blinding white. Second, with a sound like a high-tech magnetic lock disengaging, it ripped itself free from the refrigerator door. Izuku yelled in shock, stumbling backward, but it was too late. The object didn't fall. It hovered in the air for a breathtakingly brief instant, a triangular star hanging in the darkness between them, before it shot forward. It moved with unerring, impossible speed, not flying so much as instantly crossing the space between them. Before he could even throw up his arms to defend himself, it slammed into his chest with a solid, definitive thump. The force knocked the wind out of him, sending him sprawling onto his back in the sand. He gasped for air, his mind a whirlwind of panic. He expected pain, a wound, but there was nothing. Just a strange, heavy pressure on his sternum. He scrambled to sit up, clawing at his chest. His fingers met the cool, smooth surface of the device. It was pressed flat against his t-shirt, right over the center of his chest. He tried to grab it, to pry it off, but his fingers couldn't find a purchase, no edge or lip to grip. It was as if it were fused to the fabric. He tugged harder, pulling his shirt taut, but the object didn't budge. It felt attached to him. A new, terrifying thought sliced through his panic. It hadn't just stuck to his shirt. He could feel it, a subtle, painless pressure against his skin beneath the cloth. Tiny, invisible filaments had seemingly phased through the cotton, anchoring it directly to his body. "Get off!" he grunted, panic giving way to sheer terror. He balled his fist and slammed it against the device. It was like punching solid steel. The impact jarred his already damaged hand, and the object didn't even vibrate. It was then that the voice spoke. It wasn't a voice he heard with his ears. It bloomed from the inside out, a calm, clear, feminine tone that resonated directly in his skull, as if his own mind were speaking to him in a stranger's voice. IO signature confirmed. Cross-referencing. No match found in databanks. Assigning temporary designation, user. Izuku froze, his blood running cold. He looked around wildly, his eyes darting into the shadows of the junkyard. "Who's there? Who said that?" System rebooting from emergency stasis. Primary power core operational. Nanite reserves at 17%. Structural integrity compromised. External sensors, online. Query, what is your status, user? The voice was emotionless, clinical, like a doctor reading from a chart. It was this chilling calm that finally broke him. This was not a quirk. This was not a person hiding in the shadows. The voice was coming from the thing on his chest. A parasite. It had to be a parasite. A villain's weapon designed to take control of its host. He was going to be puppeteered, used to hurt people. The thought sent a jolt of pure, undiluted horror through him. He began to thrash, rolling in the sand, desperately trying to scrape the object off his chest. "Get it off me! Get it off!" he screamed, his voice raw with panic, vital signs elevated. Adrenaline and cortisol levels exceeding 98th percentile. Tachycardia detected. User, your emotional state is causing significant biometric fluctuation. Recommend regulating your breathing. Shut up! Get out of my head! He sobbed, scrambling backward on his hands and feet, away from the crash site, away from everything, as if he could run away from his own body. His flailing retreat was cut short as his back hit something hard and wet. He had backed into a large puddle of seawater trapped in a depression in the sand. He fell back with a splash, the cold water soaking his shirt and hair. He lay there for a second, hyperventilating, his mind screaming. Then he saw it. In the puddle's murky, moonlit surface, his own reflection stared back. A terrified, wild-eyed boy with a mess of green hair, his face pale with fright. And in the center of his chest, shining through his now soaked and semi-transparent t-shirt, was a triangle of brilliant, impossible blue light. It pulsed in time with his racing heart, a steady, alien beat superimposed over his own. It was a part of him now. The voice in his head, ever calm, ever present, spoke again. "Welcome, user." Izuku Midoriya could only stare at the monster in the reflection, utterly and completely terrified. The walk home was a special kind of nightmare. Every shadow was an enemy. Every pair of headlights that swept across the street felt like a searchlight zeroed in on him. The innocuous triangular device, now hidden beneath his thin jacket zipped all the way to his chin, felt like it was broadcasting its presence to the world, a beacon of impossible technology screaming, "Look at me! I don't belong here." The voice, the calm, clinical, terrifying voice in his head, had fallen silent for now, but its absence was somehow worse. It left him alone with the frantic thrumming of his own heart and the whirlwind of his thoughts. He clutched the straps of his yellow backpack so tightly his knuckles were white, his gait a half-run, half-stumble of pure panic. A villain's quirk? A government experiment? An alien? Is it reading my thoughts? Is it controlling me? Did I just get the weirdest, most dangerous quirk in the history of the world on top of the already weirdest, most dangerous quirk in the history of the world? His muttering was a low, desperate hiss, lost to the evening breeze. He took the back streets, the longer, darker route, his mind a chaotic slideshow of worst-case scenarios. He imagined the device activating on its own in the middle of a crowd, or a villain with some kind of magnetic quirk ripping it, and a chunk of his chest, right out of his body. When he finally saw the familiar, comforting lights of his apartment building, the relief was so profound his knees nearly buckled. He fumbled with his keys, his scarred hand shaking uncontrollably, the metal scraping against the lock. Finally, the door clicked open. "Izuku? Is that you?" His mother's voice, warm and concerned, shot through him like a bolt of ice. He froze in the genkan, his back to her. "Why yeah, Mom, it's me," he squeaked, his voice cracking. He hastily kicked off his red sneakers, not daring to turn around. "You're late, sweetie. I was starting to worry. Did your training with All Might run long?" Inko Midoriya rounded the corner from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Her brow was furrowed with her customary, loving concern. Yeah? Something like that." He lied, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. He kept his head down, focusing on untying his shoes as if it were the most complex task in the world. "Just got a little carried away. Lost track of time." "Oh. Well, as long as you're not overdoing it." "Your hand." Her gaze, he could feel it, fell to his scarred right hand. "It's fine. It doesn't even hurt anymore," he said a little too quickly. He finally straightened up, forcing himself to face her, but kept his body angled away, his jacket clutched tightly at the collar. Inko's eyes narrowed slightly. "Izuku, are you feeling all right? You're pale. And you're still wearing your jacket, it's warm in here." Panic flared hot in his chest. Just a little cold, that's all. From the sea breeze." It gets chilly down by the beach this time of night. It was a flimsy excuse, and he knew it. His face was flushed with adrenaline, and a thin sheen of sweat was collecting on his forehead. But Inko, for all her worry, was not one to push when he was clearly distressed. She simply offered a soft, slightly worried smile. All right, sweetie. Well, wash up. Dinner's almost ready. Katsudon. Your favorite. The mention of his favorite food, a comfort he normally cherished, only twisted the knot of guilt in his stomach. He nodded numbly, mumbled a "Thanks, Mom," and practically fled down the short hallway to his room. He slammed the door shut, locking it with a loud, definitive click. For a moment, he just leaned against the wood, his forehead pressed against the cool surface, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. Safe. He was safe. But the feeling was fleeting. He wasn't safe. The danger was in the room with him. It was on him. With trembling hands, he unzipped his jacket and shrugged it off, letting it fall to the floor. He then grabbed the hem of his soaked t-shirt and pulled it over his head, tossing it aside. He stood bare-chested in the middle of his all-might-themed bedroom, his reflection staring back at him from the full-length mirror on his closet door. And there it was. Pressed against the pale skin of his sternum was the dark, alien triangle. It wasn't just stuck to him, it looked like it had grown there. The edges were perfectly flush with his skin, with no discernible seam. It was as if a piece of the night sky had been expertly inlaid into his chest. The soft, rhythmic blue light pulsed steadily, casting an eerie glow across his face and illuminating the wide, terrified green of his eyes. He reached out and tentatively touched it. The surface was impossibly smooth, cool to the touch now, and felt as solid as diamond. He tried to get a fingernail under the edge, but there was no edge to find. It was a part of him. The realization crashed down with the force of a physical blow, and the carefully constructed dam of his composure shattered. No, 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 this can't be happening, he whimpered, his voice breaking. He started pacing the small confines of his room, his hands tangled in his green curls, tugging at them in a familiar gesture of overwhelming stress. It's a parasite. Or some kind of tracker. The League of Villains? Did they plant this on me? How? When? At the USJ? No, I would have noticed. It must have been at the sports festival. But who could get that close? It has to be a quirk. Someone's quirk is doing this to me. I have to call All Might. He'll know what to do. But what if that's what it wants? What if it's a trap? If I tell him, will it activate and hurt him? Or hurt my mom? I can't put them in danger. But I can't handle this alone. I'm not strong enough. This is too much. His muttering grew faster, more frantic, a torrent of panicked hypotheses and crippling self-doubt. He was spiraling, losing himself in the noise of his own fear. User's heart rate has exceeded 150 beats per minute. Catecholamine levels suggest a significant panic response. Would you like me to initiate a calming protocol? The voice, sudden and serene in the midst of his mental chaos, was so jarring he actually yelped and stumbled back, tripping over a stack of notebooks and landing hard on the floor. Who are you? He finally shouted at the thing on his chest, all pretense of whispering gone. What do you want from me? There was a pause, a millisecond of processing that felt like an eternity. My designation is NANO, Networked Analysis and Nanite Operation System. I am a self-contained, deployable defensive framework. My primary function is to protect my designated user. Izuku stared at his own chest, his mind struggling to parse the words. Defensive framework? Protect? It didn't sound like a villain's weapon. My user? He whispered, the question forming in his mind as much as on his lips. Correct. My previous user was... The voice paused again. The data is corrupted. My memory banks sustained critical damage during the dimensional transit event. My last directive, however, is clear: preserve the user and the system. You are the user now. Dimensional transit event. The words hung in the air, so far outside the realm of his understanding that his brain simply refused to process them. He latched onto the one thing that made a sliver of sense. You're a machine? An AI? He asked, his voice trembling. That is a functionally accurate, if simplified, description. An AI. A real, sentient AI like the ones in pre-Quirk sci-fi movies. It was bonded to him. It was a revelation so immense, so reality-altering, that it momentarily eclipsed his fear with sheer, unadulterated awe. But the fear came roaring back just as quickly. How do I get you off? The housing unit is symbiotically bonded to your biosignature at a cellular level. Removal is not possible without catastrophic damage to both the system and the host organism. That is to say, it would likely prove fatal to you. The clinical finality of the statement hit him like a physical blow. Fatal. He was stuck with it. This was his life now. A boy with 2 secret quirks and an alien AI living in his chest. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in his throat, a sound halfway between a sob and a scream. He pushed himself up, his body shaking. He looked around his room, at the posters of All Might, at the hero merchandise, at the symbols of the straightforward black and white world he had always believed in. This was gray. This was complicated and terrifying and secret. What do you do? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. You said a defensive system. The housing unit contains a finite supply of utility nanites. Through psionic interface, that is, your focused intent, you can manipulate these nanites to form tools, weapons, or protective shielding around your body. Psionic interface. Focused intent. It sounded so clean, so simple. A world away from the blood, sweat, and broken bones that defined his relationship with One for All. Would you like a demonstration, user? He hesitated for a long second. Part of him, the sensible, terrified part, screamed no. He wanted nothing to do with this. He wanted to curl up in a ball and pretend the last hour had never happened. But the other part of him, the part that had compulsively analyzed heroes his entire life, the part that yearned for knowledge and power, was thrumming with an irresistible curiosity. He had to know. Yes, he breathed. Extend your right arm. Now focus your thoughts. Visualize a protective covering. A simple gauntlet. Picture its shape, its density, its function. Izuku took a deep, shuddering breath and held out his scarred right hand. He closed his eyes, trying to block out everything else. He pictured the support gloves from his hero costume, then imagined them made of sleek, dark metal. He envisioned a shell covering his hand and forearm, strong and unyielding. A soft, whispering hiss filled the room. His eyes snapped open. The chest piece was glowing brighter, the blue light running in intricate patterns across its surface. From the edges of the triangle, a stream of something that looked like liquid mercury, dark and shimmering, flowed out. It wasn't on his skin. It was flowing over it, a river of impossible technology that crawled up his chest, over his shoulder, and down his arm. It didn't feel wet or cold. It felt like a million tiny magnets aligning, a static charge given form and purpose. The liquid metal reached his hand and began to coalesce. It swirled and shifted, 1,000 microscopic insects building a shell in perfect, synchronized harmony. Plates formed and locked into place with silent precision, vents materialized, and the shape he had pictured in his mind was constructed, atom by atom, right before his eyes. In less than 5 seconds it was done. His right arm, from his fingertips to just below his elbow, was encased in a gauntlet of the same dark, matte metal as the chest piece. It was a thing of terrifying beauty, sleek and angular, with lines of the same blue light pulsing softly within its seams. It fit him perfectly, a second skin of alien metal. He slowly, cautiously, flexed his fingers. The gauntlet moved with him without a sound, the articulation flawless. He made a fist. The feeling was incredible. There was no strain, no groaning of his own abused bones. There was just a sense of absolute, effortless solidity. He tapped his armored knuckles against the palm of his other hand. The resulting clink was sharp and definitive. This was real, or replaced terror. This was power. A different kind of power. Controlled. Precise. Safe. A tempting, seductive whisper in the back of his mind told him this was the power he deserved, the power that wouldn't break him every time he used it. He needed to test it. His eyes fell on his target, a sturdy, sand-filled all-might punching bag that hung from a reinforced hook in the corner of his room. It had endured countless frustrated, powerless punches from him as a child, and more recently, a few ill-advised, bone-shattering smashes. It was a symbol of his struggle. "Okay," he whispered, his voice hoarse with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Just a light punch." He took a stance, the gauntlet feeling surprisingly light, perfectly balanced. He drew his arm back, his muscles tensing. And in that moment, a decade of training, both imagined and real, took over. To punch with purpose meant to draw on his power. It was instinct. It was muscle memory. He didn't mean to. It was the barest flicker, a subconscious spark. He let a sliver of one for all, less than 1%, flow into his arm. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The blue lines on the gauntlet flashed a violent, angry crimson. The calm voice of Nano screamed in his mind, its composure shattering for the first time. "Warning! Massive energy surge detected. Unidentified origin. Biostress critical. Quantum matrix destabilizing. Abort! Abort!" A wave of intense heat washed over his arm, as if he'd plunged it into a furnace. A high-pitched whine emanated from the gauntlet, and for a terrifying second, he thought it was going to explode. But he had already thrown the punch. His fist connected with the all-might bag. It wasn't a punch, it was a detonation. The synergy between the nanites and the raw energy of One for All, however small, created a reaction that was exponentially more powerful than either force on its own. There was a sound like a thunderclap compressed into a microsecond. The front of the punching bag didn't just dent, it vaporized. The sand inside was blasted backward with the force of a shotgun, spraying across the far wall. The bag itself was ripped from its chain and launched like a missile, smashing into his bookshelf and sending a shower of books, papers, and all-might figurines crashing to the floor. The chain whipped back and shattered his window, the sound of breaking glass sharp and loud in the sudden silence. Izuku stood frozen, his arms still extended, his entire body trembling. The gauntlet was glowing a dull, angry red, and thin wisps of smoke were curling from its joints. The room was a disaster zone. Sand covered everything. His window was broken. His prized collection of hero memorabilia was in ruins. "Izuku? What was that noise? Are you okay?" His mother's frantic voice came from the other side of the door, followed by a frantic jiggling of the locked doorknob. "I'm fine, Mom!" he yelled back, his voice strained and panicked. I tripped and knocked over my bookshelf. Everything's okay, are you sure? It sounded like an explosion, positive. I'm just clumsy. I'll clean it up. Don't worry." He could hear her hesitating on the other side of the door, but eventually, her footsteps retreated. He was alone again, in the wreckage. "Structural integrity of the gauntlet has been compromised by 17%, Nano stated, its voice back to its default, unnerving calm. Nanite reserves have been depleted by an additional 2% to manage the thermal overload. Total reserves now at 15%. Izuku slowly lowered his arm, staring at the still glowing metal. What happened? The energy you channeled from within your own body is volatile. It is chaotic, non-uniform, and emits a form of radiation that is highly corrosive to my nanite matrix at a quantum level. The system attempted to contain and vent the energy, but the surge was too powerful and too sudden. A sustained channel of that energy would result in total system failure. He understood. One for all, the raw, untamable power of generations, and this sleek, precise, alien technology, they were like oil and water. Fire and gasoline. Using them together was not just dangerous, it was self-destructive. The armor couldn't handle the god in his veins. The tool couldn't contain the storm. With a thought, he willed the gauntlet to retract. It dissolved back into the river of liquid chrome, flowing silently back into the housing unit on his chest, leaving his arm bare and his hand shaking. The temptation he'd felt just moments ago was gone, replaced by a profound and chilling fear. This power wasn't a solution. It was just another problem. A bigger, more complicated problem. The next morning, getting ready for school was an exercise in paranoia. He stood before his mirror, the triangular light a secret shame on his chest. He tried on his uniform shirt. The faint blue glow was visible through the thin, white fabric. He tried on a second shirt underneath. Still visible. In the end, he settled on wearing a dark gray t-shirt under his uniform and leaving his school jacket unbuttoned, hoping the thicker layers and the loose-fitting blazer would hide the light. He looked different. Bulkier. More disheveled. He looked like he was hiding something. Because he was. His mother gave him a worried look over breakfast, but thankfully didn't press. He shoveled his food down, his eyes glued to his bowl, and left as quickly as he could. Walking to school, surrounded by other students, the feeling of isolation was immense. He hunched his shoulders, trying to make himself smaller. He felt a constant, low-level hum from the device, a quiet reminder of its presence. And then there was the biggest question of all Might, his mentor. The man who had given him everything. The one person he should be able to tell anything to. But how could he? How could he explain that a piece of alien technology had crashed from the sky and bonded to him? It sounded insane. Worse, he was afraid. He was terrified of what All Might would think. Would he see it as a crutch? A shortcut? A sign that Izuku didn't have enough faith in the quirk he'd been given? All Might had stressed the importance of mastering one for all through hard work, of making the power his own. Showing up with a magical suit of armor felt like a betrayal of that trust. It felt like cheating. He could already picture the look of disappointment on his mentor's face. That was a look he knew he couldn't bear to see, so he made a decision. A terrible, isolating decision. He would keep it a secret. He would study it, learn its limits, and figure out how it worked on his own. He would master one for all the right way, through his own effort. This would be his emergency backup. His last resort. A secret he would carry alone. As he walked through the massive gates of UA High, the weight of that secret pressed down on him, as real and as heavy as the impossible device fused to his chest. User's cortisol levels remain elevated, Nano observed quietly in his mind. External environment analysis. You have arrived at a location designated UA High School. Threat level nominal. Izuku flinched. Nominal? He thought, a bitter, ironic laugh dying in his throat. He was a walking time bomb of clashing energies, carrying a secret that could change the world, and the AI. In his chest thought the threat level was nominal. He had never felt more alone, or in more danger, in his entire life. The week that followed was a masterclass in deflection and paranoia. Izuku Midoriya, a boy who wore his heart on his sleeve and whose every thought was practically an open book, was forced to become an actor. He learned to smile when he was screaming on the inside. He learned to keep his jacket on during lunch, blaming a persistent chill. He learned to change for foundational heroics with his back to the wall, a maneuver so awkward it drew more than a few strange looks from Ida and Kaminari. Every night was a secret, whispered conversation with the voice in his head. He'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, the soft blue light of the chest piece casting shifting shadows across his face, and he would query Nano. He learned about its power source, a self-sustaining arc reactor that drew ambient energy from the environment. He learned about the finite nature of the nanites. They could self-replicate, but only at an excruciatingly slow rate that required immense energy and raw materials the system couldn't currently access. What he had was what he had, a dwindling resource. He learned it had a threat analysis suite, a tactical overlay he could access in his mind's eye, and a communication system that was currently only a receiver, picking up fragmented, ghost-like signals from a place Nano simply called the network, a place that no longer existed. He was a castaway with a piece of a sunken ship's radio. But the most important lesson, the one that haunted his every waking moment, was the incompatibility. He tried again, in the privacy of his ruined room, to integrate a minuscule amount of one for all with a simple nanite formation. The result was another violent energy spike, another stark warning from Nano, and a distinct, sizzling sound as a few more precious nanites burned out of existence. They were fundamentally, physically, antithetical to one another. He was a vessel for two warring gods, and his body was the battlefield. This internal conflict manifested in his training. His progress with One for All, which had been slow but steady, ground to a halt. He was hesitant, distracted. The raw, instinctual trust he needed to let the power flow was gone, replaced by a constant, nagging fear. Every time he felt the familiar green lightning begin to crackle across his skin, a part of his brain screamed at him to stop, terrified of an accidental synergy with the device on his chest. He was afraid of his own quirk. All Might noticed. Of course, he noticed. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and they were in one of UA's smaller, more private training gyms, Gym Gamma. The cavernous space was filled with concrete pillars and steel girders, a playground for destruction designed to withstand the quirks of future pro heroes. It was where All Might often took him for their one-on-one sessions, away from the prying eyes of his classmates. Young Midoriya, All Might's voice boomed, echoing slightly in the vast room. He stood in his muscle form, a radiant, unshakable pillar of strength, but his signature smile didn't quite reach his eyes. You seem distracted today. Is everything all right? Izuku, standing opposite him, flinched. He was sweating, and not just from the warm-ups. I'm fine, All Might. Just a lot on my mind. From the sports festival. And, classes. He tried for a reassuring smile, but he knew it came out as a grimace. All Might's gaze sharpened. He was more than a powerhouse. He was a detective, a man who had spent decades reading villains and allies alike. He could spot a lie a mile away, especially from his earnest, usually transparent successor. Your movements are hesitant, he continued, his tone patient but firm. You're holding back. We've been working on maintaining full cal at a stable 5%, yet you're barely managing 3. It feels like you've taken a step backward. The path to mastering one for all is paved with focus, my boy. Unwavering focus. I know. I'm sorry. Izuku bowed his head, shame washing over him. I'll try harder. I promise. Words are good, but action is better, All Might said, his smile becoming a little more genuine, more encouraging. Let's try a simple sparring exercise. No smashes. Just movement, blocks, and light counters. I want you to focus on predicting my attacks and using full cal to evade or parry. Think of it as a dance. Understand? Izuku nodded, his jaw set with a desperate resolve. He could do this. He just had to block everything else out. He had to forget the blue light humming against his sternum. He had to trust himself. He activated full cal, pushing the power to 5%. The green lightning flared to life, a familiar pressure building in his limbs. For a moment, it felt right. He was Deku, the inheritor of One for All. He could do this. All Might moved. Even holding back 99% of his true power, he was a blur of motion. It wasn't about speed. It was about terrifying, absolute efficiency. A right hook, telegraphed but impossibly swift, cut through the air where Izuku's head had been a millisecond before. Izuku ducked under it, the wind of its passage rustling his hair. He was in the rhythm. He dodged a follow-up jab, using the burst of speed from his quirk to create distance. He was dancing. Good, my boy. That's it. Anticipate. React. All Might encouraged, his voice a rumbling earthquake of approval. He came at him again, a series of light, probing attacks. Izuku was keeping up, his mind and body finally in sync. He was so focused on All Might, on the dance, that he let his guard down. He forgot the secret. All Might saw an opening. It was a feint, a left jab that made Izuku shift his weight, leaving his right side momentarily exposed. All Might's real attack was a sweeping leg kick, not aimed to injure, but to unbalance him, to test his recovery. Izuku saw it coming a fraction of a second too late. His mind screamed block, instinct took over. He brought his right arm up, bracing for the impact of the world's strongest leg. But as he moved, a deeper, colder instinct, the fear that had been living in his gut for a week, rose with it. The blow would be too strong. Even a light tap from All Might was like being hit by a small car. His arm, his fragile, human arm, would buckle. It might even break. He didn't have time to channel One for All into the block. He was too slow. Panic. In that sliver of a moment between thought and action, his desperation reached out to the only other power available to him. He didn't even consciously think it. It was a raw, silent plea for help. Protect me. No responded instantly. It happened so fast it was barely perceptible. A flicker. A ripple in the air. As All Might's boot was about to connect with his forearm, a hexagonal plate of dark, shimmering metal materialized just over his skin. It was no thicker than a sheet of cardboard, a desperate, last-ditch shield formed from a handful of nanites. Crack! The impact was sharp and loud. All Might's boot connected, and the nanite shield, unable to withstand the sheer kinetic force of the number 1 hero, shattered into 1,000 microscopic, glittering fragments. It was like a pane of black sugar glass exploding, but it did its job. The shield absorbed the brunt of the impact. It broke, but in doing so, it dispersed the force. Izuku still felt a painful, jarring shock run up his arm, and he was thrown off his feet, stumbling backward and landing hard on the gym mat. But his bone didn't break. It was a deep, throbbing ache instead of a sharp, agonizing snap. He was saved. He was also exposed. He looked up, his eyes wide with horror. All Might stood frozen in place, his legs still extended from the kick. His head was cocked to the side, and the permanent smile was gone, replaced by an expression of profound confusion. What was that? All Might asked, his voice losing its booming quality, becoming softer, more inquisitive. What was what? Izuku stammered, scrambling to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs. He cradled his aching arm, trying to act as if it were a normal injury. A sound. A cracking sound, All Might said, lowering his leg. And a flash. Just for a moment. Like light reflecting off something. He took a step closer, his sharp blue eyes scanning Izuku from head to toe. Young Midoriya, were you using some kind of support gear? Something under your sleeve? No. Of course not. The lie came out too fast, too defensive. He could feel the blood draining from his face. You hit harder than I expected, that's all. My bone must have rattled. All Might's eyes narrowed. He knew the sound of a rattling bone. He also knew the sound of a breaking one. That hadn't been either. It had been sharp, crystalline. Artificial. Show me your arm, he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Izuku's mind raced. There was nothing to see. The nanites were gone, disintegrated into inert, invisible dust. But the refusal would be an admission of guilt. With a trembling hand he pulled up the sleeve of his gym uniform, revealing his forearm. It was already starting to bruise, a nasty purple bloom spreading across the skin, but it was otherwise unmarked. All Might gently took his arm, his massive thumb probing the flesh around the bone. His touch, surprisingly, was as deft as a surgeon's. No fracture. A deep bone bruise, certainly. You'll need to see recovery girl. But I was certain I saw something. He let go of Izuku's arm but didn't look away. His gaze was piercing, analytical. He was no longer All Might, the symbol of peace. He was Toshinori Yagi, the shrewd mentor, the veteran hero who had survived decades of deception and trickery. You've been acting strangely all week, my boy, he said, his voice low and serious. You're distracted. You're hiding something. I can feel it. As your mentor, and as the one who entrusted you with this sacred power, I have to ask you again. Is there something you're not telling me? The directness of the question, the weight of the unspoken disappointment in his voice, broke through Izuku's flimsy defenses. He couldn't lie to this man. Not to his face. Not when he was looking at him with such genuine, paternal concern. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. A lump formed in his throat. His vision swam with unshed tears of guilt and fear. He looked down at the floor, unable to meet his hero's gaze. The silence stretched on, thick with tension. I see, All Might said softly, his voice heavy with a sorrow that was 1,000 times worse than anger. He sounded hurt. I thought we had built a foundation of trust, you and I. One for all is more than just a quirk, Izuku. It is a legacy. A trust passed from one soul to another. It requires absolute honesty. If you are seeking a shortcut, a different path to power because you feel this one is too difficult. No! The word ripped from Izuku's throat, raw and desperate. It's not like that. I would never. I was scared. Scared of what? Of disappointing you. Izuku finally looked up, tears streaming freely down his cheeks now. I was scared you would think I wasn't taking one for all seriously. That I was cheating. All Might's expression softened from disappointment to deep confusion. Cheating? What are you talking about? What is it you are hiding? Izuku knew there was no way out. He couldn't keep lying. The weight of the secret was crushing him, and in that moment, the fear of All Might's disappointment was less than the agony of bearing it alone. With a shaking hand, he reached for the collar of his gym shirt. He hesitated for a second, then pulled it away from his chest, exposing the dark, triangular device nestled against his sternum. The gym was brightly lit by industrial fluorescent lights, but the object seemed to swallow them. Its matte black surface was a void, and the intricate lines etched into it pulsed with their soft, steady blue light. In the sterile, familiar environment of the UA training facility, it looked profoundly, shockingly alien. All Might froze. His eyes widened, the small, black pupils shrinking to pinpricks. He took an involuntary step back, a rare, unguarded flicker of shock and disbelief on his face. He had seen countless strange and powerful quirks, fought villains with terrifying and bizarre physiologies. But this was something else entirely. By the stars and stripes. He breathed, the Americanism a relic of his time abroad, reserved for moments of true astonishment. What, in God's name, is that? The story tumbled out of Izuku in a frantic, disjointed flood. He told him everything. The strange light in the sky. The crash at Dagoba Beach. The way the device had flown to him, bonded with him. He told him about Nano, the voice in his head, the AI that called itself a defensive system. He explained the nanites, the gauntlet, and the disastrous, explosive result of trying to mix its power with One for All. He left nothing out, his words punctuated by sobs of relief and terror. He confessed his fear of telling him, his shame at feeling tempted by its safer power, his utter confusion and isolation. All Might listened, his expression shifting from shock to disbelief, then to a deep, profound seriousness. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there, a mountain of muscle and experience, absorbing the impossible story of his young successor. When Izuku finally finished, his voice trailing off into a choked whisper, the gym was silent save for the sound of his ragged breathing. For a long time, All Might said nothing. He simply stared at the device on Izuku's chest. Then, he slowly, cautiously, took a step forward. "May I?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. He held out a hand, his fingers slightly extended. Izuku nodded numbly. All Might reached out, his hand, a hand that could level a city block, moving with incredible gentleness. He rested his fingertips on the edge of the device, just where it met Izuku's skin. Izuku flinched at the contact, but All Might's touch was warm and steady. He felt a strange, faint vibration from the device, a subtle increase in the hum that only he could perceive. Unidentified biosignature in contact with housing, Nano's voice reported calmly in his mind. Energy readings are anomalous. Power output is immense, but currently in a state of high-level suppression. Threat assessment, indeterminate. All Might's brow furrowed in concentration. "I can feel it," he murmured, his voice filled with a strange awe. "There's power in this. A clean, contained energy. It feels nothing like a quirk." He traced the edges of the triangle. "And the craftsmanship, it's perfect. Flawless. Not forged or welded. It feels grown." He pulled his hand back and looked Izuku in the eye. The disappointment was gone, replaced by a complex storm of emotions, concern, wonder, and a deep, unnerving gravity. "You should have come to me immediately, my boy," he said, his voice firm but not angry. "Not out of fear of punishment, but because a burden this heavy is not meant to be carried alone. You are not alone in this journey. You never were." The simple, heartfelt words were like a key unlocking a cage Izuku didn't even know he was in. A fresh wave of tears welled in his eyes, but these were tears of relief. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "We will deal with the sorry later," All Might said, a flicker of his usual bravado returning. He clapped a heavy hand on Izuku's shoulder, making him stagger. "Right now, we have a problem. A problem of impossible, potentially world-altering proportions. And we are going to face it. Together." He looked from Izuku's tear-streaked face to the glowing device on his chest, and for the first time, a thoughtful, strategic glint appeared in his eye. The symbol of peace was a beacon of hope, but Toshinori Yagi was a pragmatist. "You say it cannot handle the power of One for All," he mused, more to himself than to Izuku. "You say that when you try to use them together, the technology overloads. But you also say that for a split second, it saved your arm from a blow that should have shattered it. He looked around the gym, at the tools of their trade, at the concrete and steel. You've been seeing this as two separate, conflicting powers, my boy, All Might said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. A choice between the path of hard work and a technological shortcut. But what if you're looking at it all wrong? He locked eyes with Izuku, his own shining with a sudden, brilliant idea. What if it's not a suit of armor to replace your power? What if it's a cast? A brace? A tool not to fight for you, but to help your body withstand the power that is already in you? He saw the spark of understanding in Izuku's eyes, the gears of his analytical mind beginning to turn. The potential. The danger. The sheer, terrifying possibility of it all. This changes things, young Midoriya, All Might said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, filled with a gravity that made the air feel thick. This changes everything. But first, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. And we need to do it in a controlled environment. The next 2 days were a blur of hushed conversations and clandestine planning. For Izuku, the world had tilted on its axis. The crushing weight of his secret had been lifted, only to be replaced by the terrifying, exhilarating pressure of a shared mission. He was no longer a boy alone with a parasitic piece of alien technology. He was a UE student engaged in a top-secret research project with the #1 hero. The shift in perspective was monumental. All Might, for his part, moved with the quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to operating in the shadows. He cancelled their regular training sessions, citing a need for Izuku to rest and reflect, a cover story that did little to assuage the worried glances from his classmates, particularly Uraraka and Ida. He secured access to one of UA's most remote and reinforced training facilities, Training Ground Gamma, also known as the Destructive Zone. It was a sprawling industrial wasteland of pipes, factories, and steel towers, designed to be broken and rebuilt, the perfect laboratory for their dangerous experiment. He also made 2 crucial additions to their team. The first was Recovery Girl. Chio Shizenji, with her perpetually weary expression and no-nonsense attitude, was more than just a school nurse. She was one of the few people in the world who knew the truth about All Might's injury, and the nature of One for All. She was UA's ultimate safety net. All Might had explained the situation to her in the vaguest possible terms. Young Midoriya has acquired a highly volatile piece of support technology that interacts explosively with his quirk, and that was enough. She had simply sighed, adjusted her glasses, and said, "Just try not to vaporize the boy, Tashinori. I'm getting too old to be reassembling limbs from scratch." The second addition was a complete surprise to Izuku. He and All Might arrived at Ground Gamma late in the afternoon, the setting sun casting long, distorted shadows across the faux industrial landscape. Recovery Girl was already there, waiting by a mobile medical station, her expression as grim as a battlefield surgeon's. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, practically vibrating with an energy that made the air hum, was a girl with wild pink dreadlocks, eyes like golden targeting reticles, and a grease-stained UA support course uniform. "Hatsum?" Izuku yelped, his surprise overriding his anxiety. May Hatsum's head snapped towards them, her zoom lens eyes instantly focusing on Izuku, then locking onto the faint blue glow visible beneath his gym uniform. A grin that was equal parts manic genius and unhinged curiosity split her face. "So this is the patient," she declared, her voice a cheerful boom that was far too loud for a secret meeting. "All Might said you had a super cute, one-of-a-kind, high-energy technological marvel in need of a checkup. Come on, don't be shy. Let me see the baby." All Might let out a weary sigh that ruffled his golden bangs. "Hatsum, we discussed the need for discretion." Right. Discretion," she said, giving a thumbs up. Then she leaned in conspiratorially towards Izuku, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that was still audible from 20 feet away. "But seriously, is it an oscillating power core? A microfusion cell? Please tell me it uses quantum entanglement for data transmission." Izuku looked at All Might, his expression a mask of bewildered panic. "All Might, why is she here?" "Young Hatsum is a genius, my boy," All Might said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "A bit eccentric, perhaps, but her understanding of mechanics and power systems is second to none in this school. I am a brawler. You are an analyst. But this, he gestured towards Izuku's chest, this is a machine. If we are to understand it, truly understand it, we need an engineer, someone who can see not just what it does, but how it works. Under a strict vow of secrecy, of course, May had already closed the distance between them, her golden eyes wide with an almost religious fervor as she stared at the chess piece. May I? She asked, her hands twitching with the urge to touch, to deconstruct, to know. Izuku, still reeling, gave a hesitant nod. He pulled up his shirt, revealing the triangular device in its full, alien glory. The reaction was immediate. May gasped, a sharp, reverent intake of breath. Her zoom lenses clicked and whirred, magnifying the object tenfold. She reached out a trembling, grease-stained finger and traced one of the glowing blue lines, her touch as delicate as a bomb disposal expert's. No seams, she whispered, her usual boisterous energy gone, replaced by a profound, hushed drawl. No power cables, no heat sinks. The energy signature is perfectly stable, perfectly contained. The housing is a single, cold-forged crystalline alloy, but that's impossible. This isn't support gear. This isn't human technology. She looked up, her golden eyes locking with Izuku's, and for the first time, he saw not a mad inventor, but a true prodigy staring at the face of God. This, she breathed, is the most beautiful baby I have ever seen in my entire life. Recovery Girl cleared her throat impatiently. Are we quite done with the introductions? Some of us have an early bedtime. The mood shifted back to seriousness. All Might laid out the plan. The objective wasn't to test the suit's offensive capabilities, its blades, its repulsors, its flight. They already knew it could function on its own. The objective was far more dangerous and far more specific, to test the theory of synergy. Could the nanites be used not as armor, but as a biological brace? Could technology be used to contain the raw, untamed force of a god? No, Izuku began, his voice a low murmur as he relayed All Might's instructions to the AI in his mind. The goal is harm reduction. I need you to form a thin, flexible layer of nanites over my right arm. Not a solid gauntlet. Think of it like an external ligament. A reinforcement for my bones and muscles. A structural reinforcement protocol, and No responded, its tone as calm as ever. This is a viable function. However, previous attempts to integrate with the user's bioenergy have resulted in system damage. I must advise against this course of action. The probability of catastrophic failure is significant. We know the risk, Izuku whispered back. But we have to try. Can you monitor my biometrics? Tell me exactly when the stress on my bones is reaching its breaking point. I can monitor your skeletal and muscular integrity in real time. I will provide haptic and auditory feedback if stress levels approach a critical threshold. Handsome, All Might said, turning to the engrossed engineer. I need you to monitor the device itself. I want readings on its energy output, temperature, structural integrity, anything you can get. Tell us if it's about to overload. May was already pulling a myriad of strange, spider-like devices from a large metal case. Way ahead of you, big guy. I've got a full-spectrum energy scanner, a thermal imager, and a quantum resonance detector I whipped up last night. It probably won't explode. Recovery Girl just shook her head and prepared a stretcher. Izuku took his place in the center of a clearing, 100 meters from the others. His target was a massive, 10-foot-thick pillar of reinforced concrete, a monument to industrial over-engineering. He took a deep breath, the cool evening air doing little to calm the frantic hummingbird of his heart. Okay, No, he murmured. Deploy the brace. Right arm. The familiar, whispering hiss of the nanites answered him. The dark, mercury-like stream flowed from his chest, this time forming a much finer, more intricate pattern across his arm. It wasn't solid plates, but a complex, interwoven mesh, like high-tech chain mail or the muscle fibers of an artificial limb. It wrapped around his arm from shoulder to knuckles, molding to his form, feeling less like armor and more like a compression sleeve woven from solid steel. The blue lights within it were dim, a gentle, pulsing azure. He looked over at the observation team. May was staring intently at a series of holographic displays that had sprung up around her, chattering excitedly to herself. Recovery Girl looked unimpressed but ready. All Might gave him a single, firm nod. You can do this. Izuku turned back to the concrete pillar. He closed his eyes, focusing inward. One for all, full cowl. 5%. The green lightning ignited across his body. The moment the energy touched his right arm, the blue lights in the nanite mesh flickered, turning a pale, cautionary yellow. Energy surge detected, and ANO reported in his mind. Nanite matrix is under strain. Temperature increasing by 7 degrees Celsius. Proceed with caution. What's it doing? All Might's voice boomed from the sideline. Energy levels are spiking. May shouted back, not taking her eyes off her scanners. The baby is actively trying to disperse the energy. It's routing it through the entire lattice structure, preventing it from concentrating in one spot. It's acting like a lightning rod. It's brilliant. Izuku took another breath. 5% felt stable. The mesh was holding. The arm didn't feel like it was about to explode. It felt supported. Strong. I'm going to increase the output, he called out, his voice tight. He gritted his teeth, concentrating with every fiber of his being. He pushed the power, not with a sudden burst, but with a slow, steady increase, like turning a dial. 6%. 7. 8. The green lightning around him grew brighter, more intense. The nanite mesh on his arm glowed a brighter, more urgent yellow. Skeletal stress at 30%, and ANO warned. Matrix temperature increasing. 40 degrees. 50. The heat is climbing. May yelled. The alloy is under incredible stress, but its integrity is holding. This material is insane. 8% was the usual point where a single, focused smash would shatter his bones. But his arm felt fine. The familiar, agonizing pressure wasn't there. It was like the nanites were a cage, and one for all was the beast roaring within it, contained for the first time. A wild, heady sense of possibility filled him. This was it. This was the key. I'm going higher, he announced, a grin spreading across his face. 10%, he pushed. The power surged. The world seemed to sharpen, to brighten. The feeling was intoxicating. He could feel the bones in his arm groaning, the nanites screaming under the strain. The mesh's light shifted from yellow to a fiery, warning orange. Skeletal stress at 60%. Matrix temperature at 90 degrees. User, this is approaching the system's operational limits. His output is incredible. All Might roared, a note of awe in his voice. He's never been able to handle this much without breaking. The housing unit's energy signature is starting to fluctuate. May shrieked, a mixture of terror and ecstatic discovery in her voice. It's gonna blow. Izuku knew he was at the edge. He could feel it. One more step and he would fall. But he was holding 10%. 10%. He wasn't just containing it, he was controlling it. Now! All Might commanded. Unleash it, my boy! A controlled smash. Right into the pillar. This was the true test. Izuku took a deep, final breath, planting his feet. He drew his braced arm back, the green and orange light swirling around it in a chaotic, beautiful dance. He focused all the power, all the hope, all the fear, into his fist. He screamed, the sound a release of all his pent-up frustration and doubt. Delaware smash. He didn't punch. He flicked his finger, the classic move he'd used at the sports festival, the one that had broken his bones time and time again. But this time, it was backed by 10% of one for all, focused and contained. The result was not a simple shockwave. It was a focused, piercing blast of pure force, a jet of pressurized air, visible as a distortion in the space around his finger, shot forward. It struck the 10-foot-thick concrete pillar dead center. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a spider web of cracks erupted from the point of impact. The cracks spread, widened, and with a deafening crack boom, the entire top half of the pillar exploded into a cloud of concrete dust and shrapnel. The recoil was immense. It threw Izuku back several feet, and a searing, white-hot pain shot up his arm. The nanite mesh flashed a brilliant, critical red, and then, with a sound like shattering glass, it seemed to burn away, the intricate lattice disintegrating into a shower of inert, glittering dust. He landed on his back, his entire body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. His right arm was a universe of pain. He cradled it to his chest, hissing through his teeth. It felt like he plunged it into boiling oil. But as he flexed his fingers, a sob of pure, unadulterated triumph escaped his lips. It wasn't broken. His arm was screaming in agony, the muscles were torn, and the bone was bruised to the core, but it wasn't broken. The team rushed to his side. Recovery Girl was there first, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line as she examined the angry, red skin of his arm. Severe tissue damage and deep thermal burns, she diagnosed curtly. The technology may have saved the bone, but it cooked the flesh. You're a reckless, foolish boy. She planted a soft kiss on his arm, and a wave of soothing, accelerated healing washed over him, the intense pain dulling to a manageable throb. May was next, practically crawling over him to get a look at the now darkened chest piece. Incredible! The nanites sacrificed themselves. They acted as a catastrophic failure point, absorbing the final kinetic and thermal backlash to preserve the user's limb. The design is flawless. It prioritizes host survival above all else. I need to build one, but it was All Might who knelt beside him, his massive form casting a long shadow. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, and Izuku looked up into his mentor's face. The hero's signature smile was gone, replaced by an expression of overwhelming awe, pride, and a deep, profound relief. You did it, my boy, All Might said, his voice thick with emotion. You did it. Izuku, still lying on the ground, looked from his throbbing but intact arm to the devastated remains of the concrete pillar, and then to the faces of his strange, secret little team. He had pushed past his limits. He had faced the impossible conflict within him and forged a new path. Warning, Nao's voice cut through his triumphant haze, a sobering dose of reality. Nanite reserves have been critically depleted. Total reserves now at 9%. Self-replication protocols are insufficient to replenish losses at this rate. Continued use at this intensity is unsustainable. The victory felt a little less absolute. He had found the key, but the key was fragile. It was a finite resource. He couldn't rely on it. Not for every fight. Not even for every training session. Each high percentage smash would come at a cost, burning away a piece of this impossible gift. He's right, you know, May said, looking up from a scanner that was pointed at his chest. Your baby is running on empty. Whatever those little guys are made of, they're a limited edition. We need to figure out their base composition, their power source, their fabrication matrix. It would take years. Decades, maybe. Unless... Her eyes lit up with that familiar, terrifying spark of invention. Unless we had a sample to reverse engineer, the idea hung in the air. Could they replicate it? Could they rebuild it? Could they make it better? The path forward was no longer about choosing between two powers. It was about balance. It was about conservation, strategy, and innovation. It was about mastering one for all on its own, so that when he truly needed it, when the stakes were highest, he could call upon this incredible, dangerous synergy and shatter the limits of what was possible for a hero. Looking at the dust settling around the ruined pillar, Izuku Midoriya understood. His journey had just become infinitely more complicated, and infinitely more interesting. He had inherited the power of the world's greatest hero. Now, he had to prove himself worthy of a second, far stranger inheritance, the last remnant of a hero from a world beyond his own. The bar was a festering sore in a forgotten corner of Kamino Ward, a place where the shadows clung to the walls like mold and the air tasted of stale beer, old smoke, and simmering resentment. It had no name, no sign, just a perpetually grimy door that opened into a pocket of society that had been excised from the bright, hero-worshipping world outside. This was the League of Villains' current sanctuary, and its atmosphere perfectly matched the mood of its de facto leader. Tamura Shigaraki scratched at his neck, the dry, rasping sound of his nails against chapped skin the only noise in the room. His other hand was curled around a rock's glass, his pinky finger held carefully aloft, a habit ingrained by a power he loathed as much as he utilized. The glass, and the amber liquid within, remained intact. For now, he was losing. That was the core, itchy truth of it. The attack on the USJ, which should have been a glorious, game-changing debut, had been a failure. A resounding, humiliating failure. They hadn't killed All Might. He'd been beaten, yes, battered and pushed to his limit, but the symbol of peace had rallied, smashing the Nomu into the stratosphere and standing victorious. The children, the precious hero brats in training, had survived. Some had even fought back with infuriating competence, and Shigaraki had been left with nothing but a handful of arrested street thugs, a dead monster, and a reputation as a theatrical but ultimately ineffective man-child. The underworld, the shadowy brokers and power players he needed to win over, were not impressed. They saw a tantrum, not a revolution. "It's not fair," he rasped, his voice a low, gravelly whine. He stared at his own distorted reflection in the dark mirror behind the bar. "It's like this whole world is a rigged game, and I'm the only one who didn't get the cheat codes. All Might, those kids, they just keep winning." A swirling portal of dark purple mist coalesced in the middle of the room, silent and seamless. Kurojairi, the League's ever-present, ever-patient caretaker, stepped through, his form a tailored suit wrapped around a cosmic void, his yellow eyes glowing with faint, ethereal light. "Patience, Tamura Shigaraki," the warped villain's voice soothed, a deep, rumbling baritone that seemed to absorb the petulance in the air. "A foundation must be laid before a castle can be built. Our efforts at the USJ were not without merit. We have sown fear. We have shown the world that even the hallowed halls of UA are not safe." Shigaraki scoffed, turning on his stool to glare at Kurojairi. "Fear? They held a sports festival a week later. A nationwide party. They're not scared, they're laughing at us. And now this hero killer is stealing all the headlines. Stain. He's what they're afraid of. He has a conviction, a philosophy. All I have is a high score I can't beat." His scratching intensified, a frantic, angry motion that was starting to break the skin. Kurojairi was about to offer another placating remark when a new voice, distorted and synthesized, crackled to life from a large, flat-screen monitor mounted on the wall. The screen, previously dark, flickered on, displaying nothing but a static-filled audio wave visualization. "Patience is a virtue, Tamura, but so is observation." The voice was calm, ancient, and layered with a chilling authority that instantly silenced Shigaraki's complaints. This was the voice of his master, his sensei. The voice of All for One. Shigaraki straightened up, his hand falling away from his neck. "Sensei," he said, his tone shifting from petulant to deferential. "The hero killer is a symptom of the disease, not a rival for your position," the voice continued, smooth and didactic, like a professor lecturing a favored student. "Let him prune the weaker branches of this hero's society. It saves us the effort. His chaos provides an excellent smokescreen for more subtle endeavors." "Kurojairi report?" Kurojairi inclined his misty head. "The new recruits are manageable. Toga is eager but undisciplined. Dabi is aloof but powerful. Spinner is loyal to Stain's ideology, which makes him a useful tool for now. Our resources remain limited, however." "Resources can be acquired," All for One said dismissively. "Intelligence is far more valuable. Which brings me to the reason for my call. I have been monitoring UA High School, not just its security protocols or personnel, but its energy signatures." Shigaraki's interest was piqued. He leaned forward, his red eyes fixed on the screen. "Energy signatures? Like quirks?" "Precisely. Every quirk, no matter how subtle, emits a unique energy signature. A bioelectric field that can be detected with the proper equipment. Over the past few weeks, my long-range sensors have been picking up an anomaly. A ghost in the machine." The audio wave on the screen shifted, and a new graphic appeared, a complex, three-dimensional topographical map of the energy fields around the UA campus. Most of it was a gentle, rolling landscape of low-level biosignatures. But there were spikes. A large, constant one that Sensei identified as the school's primary power grid, and smaller, flickering ones representing the students and faculty. "Watch," Sensei commanded. The display zoomed in on a specific training area, Ground Gamma. A timeline appeared in the corner of the screen. As it scrolled forward to a specific date and time, 2 days ago, late in the afternoon, a new energy signature flared into existence. It was utterly unlike the others. The quirk signatures were messy, chaotic, organic. They flared and sputtered like flames. This new signature was a perfect, crystalline spike. It was clean, uniform, and impossibly dense. It flared once, twice, and then, in a single, massive burst, it erupted with a power reading that made the sensors scream. The spike of energy was enormous, but it was also incredibly brief, a flashbulb in the dark before it vanished completely. Shigaraki stared, mesmerized. What was that? What quirk can do that? That is the anomaly, All for One replied, a note of genuine curiosity in his synthesized voice. It is not a quirk. It has none of the chaotic biomarkers. It is a technological signature, pure, refined, weaponized energy. A level of miniaturization and power output that, frankly, should not be possible. It rivals the output of my own support systems. Coming from All for One, a man who had curated and hoarded the pinnacle of technology for over a century, this was a staggering admission. So, a new support item? Kurogyri surmised. Perhaps from Island? Unlikely. Their technology, while advanced, still operates within known scientific principles. This is a paradigm shift. It is either a state-sponsored Black Ops project of unprecedented secrecy, or it is something else entirely. Something not of this world. The last few words were spoken with a weight that made the air in the bar feel cold. Shigaraki felt a thrill, a jolt of genuine excitement that cut through his sullen mood. A mystery. A new, powerful piece on the game board. A potential cheat code. Who has it? He demanded, his voice hungry. Which hero? Is it one of the teachers? That is the most intriguing part, Sensei said. The signature is mobile. And its appearances coincide with the movements of the UA students. My analysis suggests the source is not a faculty member, but one of the children from Class 1A. Shigaraki's eyes widened, and a slow, ugly grin spread across his face. One of the brats from the USJ. Perfect. It's just perfect. The irony was delicious. The source of his greatest humiliation might now hold the key to his greatest victory. This changes our priorities, All for One stated, his voice turning from academic to commanding. Acquiring this technology is now of paramount importance. It could be a weapon, a power source, a shield. The applications are limitless. We must have it. What do you need me to do, Sensei? Shigaraki asked, his earlier ennui forgotten, replaced by a gamer's intense focus. This was a new quest. A main story quest. Kurogyri and I will continue to analyze the energy readings from a distance. But we need eyes and hands on the ground. We need someone who can get close, someone who can analyze the technology, and, if the opportunity arises, acquire it. We need a specialist. A new profile appeared on the monitor. It was a police mugshot of a man in his late 20s with greasy, dark hair tied back in a messy ponytail. His eyes were wide, almost manic, and his fingers, visible in the shot, were unnaturally long and thin, tipped with what looked like metallic filaments. A rap sheet scrolled beside the image, listing charges from data theft and corporate espionage to illegal tech modification and trafficking. This is Junkwire, All for One explained. His real name is Kaido Tanaka. His quirk, Technopath, allows him to interface with and analyze any piece of technology he makes physical contact with. He can't control it in the way a technomancer might, but he can read it. He can understand its design, its function, its power source, all in a matter of seconds. He is a scavenger, a bottom feeder who deals in stolen support gear and black market electronics. He is also greedy, immoral, and desperate. Kurogyri, you will retrieve him. Offer him whatever he wants. Money, equipment, a place in our new world. He will be our bloodhound. Kurogyri bowed. As you command, Sensei. The edges of his form began to dissolve into mist. What's my role? Shigaraki asked, a hint of his earlier petulance returning. He didn't like the idea of some new player taking the lead. Your role, Tamura, is to prepare. This technology, whatever it is currently in the hands of a child. It is a sword in the hands of someone who has not yet learned how to wield it. But Yui is a fortress. A direct assault is foolish. We will wait. We will watch. We will let Junkwire track the scent. And when the child inevitably leaves the safety of the castle walls, you will be there to greet him. You will take the sword. And you will show the world how it is meant to be used. The monitor clicked off, plunging the bar back into its familiar gloom. The quest had been given. The target was set. A new piece was in play, and for the first time since the USJ, Tamura Shigaraki felt the exhilarating, addictive thrill of a game he might actually be able to win. 2 days later, in a different kind of hell, Junkwire ran his tongue over his teeth, tasting the metallic tang of his own quirk. His workshop was a cramped, humid storage container in the bowels of the Naruhata Industrial District, a chaotic maze of stripped-down support gear, tangled wires, and scavenged computer parts. The air smelled of solder, ozone, and desperation. He was working on a stolen hero gauntlet, trying to bypass its biometric lock so he could sell it on the black market. His fingers, tipped with their gleaming, data jack filaments, were plunged into the device's main control panel. His eyes closed in concentration. He could feel the flow of data, the lines of code, the faint electric heartbeat of the machine. It was like a second language to him, the only one he was truly fluent in. A sudden, chilling drop in temperature made him open his eyes. The single, bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered as a vortex of purple-black mist swirled into existence in the center of his cramped space. Junkwire scrambled back, his chair tipping over as he fell to the floor. He grabbed the nearest weapon, a heavy, industrial-grade soldering iron, and held it out like a sword, his heart hammering in his chest. Who the hell are you? How did you find this place? Calm yourself, Kaido Tanaka, Kurojiri's deep voice rumbled from the swirling void. We are not here to harm you. We are here to offer you a job. Junkwire stared, his mind racing. He recognized the villain. The warp gate from the news, from the USJ attack. The League of Villains. This was Big League. Way above his pay grade. I'm not interested, he said, his voice shaking despite his best efforts to sound tough. I'm a thief, not a terrorist. Get out of my shop. A thief who is 2 months behind on his payments to the Hasaikai, Kurojiri stated calmly. A thief whose black market contacts are drying up because of the recent hero crackdown. A thief who is one bad deal away from ending up in a Tartarus cell or a shallow grave. We are aware of your circumstances. The mention of the Yakuza sent a jolt of pure fear through Junkwire. He was in deep, and he knew it. He lowered the soldering iron slightly. What kind of job? A retrieval, Kurojiri said. A sleek, black tablet materialized from his misty form and clattered onto the workbench. Our employer has detected a piece of unknown technology operating in or around UA High School. We believe it is in the possession of a student. Junkwire cautiously approached the tablet and picked it up. The screen glowed to life, displaying the same energy signature data All for One had shown Shigaraki. He stared at the clean, perfect spike of energy, and his eyes, the eyes of a man who had spent his life picking apart other people's machines, went wide. What is this? He breathed, his fear momentarily forgotten, replaced by a technician's obsessive curiosity. The power output is impossible. There's no signal degradation, no heat bloom. The efficiency is nearly 100%. This isn't a support item. This is theoretical. It's a miracle. Our employer agrees, Kurojiri said. Your task is simple. We will provide you with a long-range, mobile version of the sensor that detected this. You will use it to pinpoint the source, find the student who carries this miracle. Identify them. Learn their patterns. And when the time is right, you will help us take it. And what's in it for me? Junkwire asked, his greedy nature overriding his caution. Your debt to the Hasaikai will be paid in full. You will be given a new workshop, state-of-the-art, with access to any components you desire, and you will be given the opportunity to study this technology once we have acquired it. A chance to be the first man in the world to understand how it works. Kurojiri paused, letting the offer sink in. And of course, you will have a place in the new world we intend to build. Junkwire looked from the impossible data on the tablet to the swirling vortex of the villain before him. Tartarus on one side, a state-of-the-art lab and a seat at the table on the other. It wasn't a choice. It was an ultimatum. He set the tablet down and looked at Kurojiri, a manic, hungry glint in his eyes. Okay, he said, a slow grin spreading across his face. Let's go hunting. His first lead was obvious. The energy spike had come from a Yui training ground. His first surveillance point would be the school itself. He was given a van, a plethora of listening and scanning devices, and a simple directive: watch, wait, and listen for the ghost in the machine. But for days there was nothing. The energy signature remained dormant. Junkwire grew frustrated, spending his time poring over the initial data, trying to triangulate a more specific location, a more specific time. He cross-referenced the Yui schedule. The spike had occurred during a period reserved for private training. It was a dead end. Then came the news alert, flashing across one of his monitors. Chaos in Hosa City. Noma. Villains. The hero killer, Stain. Junkwire sat up, his interest piqued. Where there was chaos, there were heroes. Where there were heroes from UA, there was a chance. On a hunch, he activated the mobile sensor, a large, sensitive dish mounted on the roof of his van, and aimed it in the direction of Hosa. For hours, the sensor picked up nothing but the background noise of the city, the chaotic energy of dozens of quirks clashing. It was a mess, a cacophony of signals. And then it happened. A single, pure, crystalline note rose above the noise. It was the signature. It was faint, flickering, but unmistakable. A perfect, clean spike of technological energy, flaring to life in the heart of the chaos. It was brief, a series of short, controlled bursts, not the massive eruption from the initial reading, but it was there. It was active. Junkwire's hands flew across his console, triangulating the signal's origin. The map on his screen zoomed in, locking onto a narrow, blood-soaked alleyway in the center of the fighting. His bloodhound senses were tingling. He had the scent. The signal flared one last time, a brilliant, powerful spike that was far stronger than the others, before vanishing completely. The hunt was on. He now knew where to look. He just needed a name, and a face. And in the aftermath of a disaster like Hosu, there would be witnesses, security footage, and heroes talking. Sooner or later, his target would make a mistake and reveal himself. And Junkwire would be there, waiting in the shadows, ready to understand the miracle before helping his new employers tear it away.